Welcome to Musicians versus the World, the podcast where we explore aspects of music and musician life that may not have been covered in music school. I am your host, Christine Smith. And today we're talking about a subject that is very close to my heart and one that I think is critically important for our world today. We are going to talk about the role of music and music therapy in healthcare. And joining me today is Gaelen McCormick, Director of Eastman Performing Arts Medicine. Gaelen McCormick was a member of the Rochester Philharmonic's double bass section from 1995 to 2017. After losing her hearing in 2017, she began a career shift into arts administration and nonprofit leadership. Since 2018, she has been the director of Eastman Performing Arts Medicine, a collaborative program of the University of Rochester Medical Center and the Eastman School of Music. EPAM seeks to enhance the lives of our community through the many intersections of arts and healthcare. In addition to her work in arts advocacy, Gaelen has published multiple books on bass bow pedagogy, as well as duet compositions. She was a faculty member of Nazareth College and joined the Eastman Community Music School in 2001. As a member of the Arts Leadership Program at the Eastman School of Music, she teaches career skills for both on and off stage. Mirroring her passion for arts education and arts in health advocacy, she is the incoming president of the International Society of Bassists and holds a board seat with the National Organization for Arts in Health. And she was so generous to come and speak with us today, and I'm excited to talk with her all about this wonderful work that she's doing. So Gaelen McCormick, thank you so much for being here, and welcome to Musicians versus the World.
Thank you so much, Christine. It's so nice to join you today.
I'm just so excited to learn everything about EPAM. Let's just jump right into it. What is EPAM and what does it do?
Eastman Performing Arts Medicine, and we'll shorten that up to EPAM as we talk for sure, because it's a mouthful. We're based on a 4-pillar program, and we mirrored this off Houston Methodist Hospital's Center for Performing Arts Medicine. And so those 4 pillars are healthcare for performing artists. You know, we know that sports medicine, for instance, if an athlete is injured, we know they need specific care immediately. We know this about artists, but we haven't had a great way to present that to them. So here in this community, we have a lot of doctors who have a lot of experience working with Garth Fagan Dance or Chiva Theater or the Rochester Philharmonic or the Eastman School of Music. So we've developed a really simple way for people to get connected and to kind of jump the line to get into those services quickly if it's impairing their ability to perform. The second part of our program is how we can integrate arts broadly throughout the hospital landscape. Ultimately, this will be healthcare, but right now we're working within the University of Rochester Medical Center, which has many hospitals for us to deploy the artists. So that could be music in the lobby. It could be music directly to patients through an iPad program. So we keep them safe. We keep the artists out of the hospital. And there's a lot of ways this is going to show up with visual arts as well. There's a lot of room in most hospitals for improvement in the environment and using the arts to enhance your experience. The third pillar of our program is creative arts therapy. And I'm really lucky that here music therapy has been existing in our hospital for over 20 years, but it's been a very small program and it's only been for children. And there's no magic about music therapy in children. Like music therapy can help adults just as well. So we've been developing the infrastructure and the funding streams to be able to increase music therapy and also to help people understand that therapist with a guitar is different from my artist who's in the lobby playing their guitar. They have very, very different roles and very different training. And our fourth pillar is research about the impact of arts on health. And this is a really timely thing for us to be studying. You know, the National Institutes of Health, Francis Collins and Renee Fleming got together to think about this just a few years ago. Like, what could we do to really formalize this study of why music therapy works, for instance, or why, for instance, having a better artistic environment around you when you're recovering, why does that make your recovery go better? So we're just getting that fourth pillar off the ground, but I can talk more about that if you want to know specifics about some of the really cool research studies we're going to get going.
Yeah, I was actually hoping that we could talk about that for sure. Before we do, I would love to hear what you were meaning by the music in the lobby, because I've played the piano in hospital lobbies before, and I've seen the changes in people. I just remember very clearly this one time, this elderly patient was wheeled down by their nurse, and he was in such a bad way and just so angry. But then after sitting and listening for a while, he mentioned to me that he was in much less pain just from relaxing and listening. But that's completely different from an actual music therapist in the room. Can you explain the difference between those two things?
Absolutely. And first of all, I'm really glad you had that experience, because sometimes when we play in the lobby, people are coming and going. And so you might not see that ripple. But when someone can sit and you can see them for a while, it is really transformative most of the time. I mean,
Right.
we have to acknowledge there are times that's not going to reach the person for whatever reason, but I'm really
True.
glad that you had that experience. So the artists who play in our lobby, we train them through a program that was developed in collaboration with other performing arts medicine groups like Houston Methodist. And they do what it sounds like you did, which is to kind of feel the environment out, sense what's happening, and pay a lot of attention to what kind of responses you're getting. Generally keeping the music pretty calm, pretty knowable, if that makes sense. So we're not going to go to anything really crazy contemporary or fast and loud. And when you think about entering the hospital, I'm terrified of hospitals, so I think it's hilarious that I've wound up working full time in one. One thing I love about it is right where we do the music, you come in from the garage, you come around this corner, and now there's, a big atrium, it's nice and light and bright, and there's a human being playing the music. We have had a player piano for a while, and when I first got my job, I started interviewing people who worked in the area about the player piano, and it was 100%, please unplug that thing. I said, why? They're like, it plays the same songs over and over again. We can't control the volume. I thought, it's also weird. You're hearing music and seeing the keys move, and there is no one there. And that's a little strange.
Yeah, it can be disorienting a little bit.
So our goal in the lobby is just to provide a more welcoming experience. And I have seen some studies that have talked about different kinds of recorded music, but I'm a complete believer, and I will study this at some point, that there's a difference in seeing someone like you actually making the music and feeling that connection of the sound literally being produced by your actions or your breath if you're playing a wind instrument. Now, we can't call it therapy because we don't have a clinical goal. So that's really where music therapy starts to differ, is they've done at least an undergraduate, often a master's degree in music therapy. There's an extensive internship training program. I believe it's 1,200 hours that they do to complete their certification before they sit for a board exam. So really, the music therapist is partnered with the physician or nurses, the clinical care team, and they have very specific clinical goals. It could be behavioral. It could be that, let's say a teen is really struggling with an acquired disability. They may use songwriting to help them process that emotional work. It can be behavioral. I'm just thinking children because we have a lot of children's music therapists, but a lot of kids are afraid of needles, and I am too. And so you can use the music therapy as a way to both distract them, but help them develop that skill if they have to get needle sticks on a regular basis of, this is going to be okay, and just providing that focal point away from what's happening. And there's also really interesting ways watching them work with physical therapy that, if you're regaining your ability to walk, it's a lot more enjoyable to walk with music that's being played for you at the tempo that you can walk to. And what we've seen is that the patients will walk longer if they've got that music. And the music therapist can also use a psych element of, like, let's write the words talking about your journey out of here. And it's just really beautiful to watch that happen, that we can kind of overcome some of the pain and anxiety issues by having a diversion, but with a very specific goal. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think that's beautiful to have a patient write lyrics explaining their own journey, because our emotions and our physical are so connected. And to have a therapy that brings that together, that's a beautiful idea. Now, how about insurance when it comes to music therapy? Is that part of your pillar too? You said something about funding, and I know insurance is a big part of funding. Do you ever dive into that mess at all?
So, yes. Can you see the weight on me?
I sure can.
Music therapy is almost universally not reimbursed. And it's
Right.
a very large conversation that's been happening on a national scale for a long time, because really music therapy should be considered the same as physical therapy or respiratory therapy. Like, this isn't I'm afraid because it's music, people see it as a nice extra, and it's really not. It is a therapy. So we're part of that conversation. Should this be something that becomes reimbursable? And the flip side of that coin, I'm constantly reminded, is if you do that and a patient can't pay for it, now what? So we're really examining, where is it worth spending our energy on this? Should we see if it can become reimbursable and we make it possible for folks who can't afford it or who don't have insurance? But it's to me, it's one of the great mistakes right now in our health insurance, is that we don't view that as the therapy with a capital T, like all the other therapies.
Right. And that's probably where all of this research that EPAM is doing, I'm sure, will help move that along, right?
It will, but we're not the first ones. You can do any kind of PubMed search and see that there's a lot of research that already supports music therapy in all kinds of very specific situations. And so I'm a little bit puzzled as an outsider why that hasn't already moved the needle on the insurance, either the insurance conversation or on the return on investment from the hospital. So that's another one of those very boring spreadsheet places that I get to go, where it's like, well, it's a little hard to justify, but I could say, for instance, how I just said needle sticks with the child.
Mhm.
If having that music therapist there makes that appointment take 2 minutes instead of 25, you can actually put a number on that. Like, what does that mean for the staff's time, in addition to the psychological trauma and the stress for the parents and all those things?
Right.
So there is a way for us to parcel out and say, this is absolutely beneficial financially. It's still a conversation that we have to push forward, though.
Yeah, I can see that being an uphill battle and pretty tough. So it's a wonderful thing that your hospital system is so receptive to that. That's how did they become so receptive to these type of interventions?
Yeah, it is. Part of it is that just the education of our staff. And since it has been in the children's hospital for 20 years, and we are just now reaching 1 year of having an adult population, a lot of it is, again, just explaining that this isn't just a nice visit to hear some music, that there's an actual clinical goal. But I tell you, once the staff get it, it's suddenly we get all these referrals. Our poor music therapist is overwhelmed and having to say, okay, let's only focus on this type of problem. But I do feel like as that becomes more part of our culture, it will just continue to flourish.
Oh yes. Oh yes. And it's very easy to see the differences when you actually take the time to look and to pay attention. Now, what is your role as director?
I feel like I'm the what do you call it? The Swiss Army knife, right? A little bit of everything right now. The biggest thing I am is the connector of all the different pieces. So at the University of Rochester, the Eastman School of Music is downtown, has been for a long time. We just celebrated 100 years. Beautiful historic building, but it's 5 or 6 miles away to what we call the River Campus, which is the liberal arts campus. And then it's another half mile or so to this medical complex, which is the hospitals, the cancer center, the School of Medicine, the School of Dentistry. And then another little, maybe quarter mile, there's the Neuroscience Institute, the School of Nursing. And so really, literally, I drive a lot from all these places. Because really, once I meet people and I talk about the power of music in particular, because we're partnered with the Eastman School, when I start talking about that, it's very easy for them to say, oh, for instance, I can see how the nursing students could really benefit from this. So starting last summer, we started a very compressed schedule. What do you call that? Like an intensive training program to reduce the number of months it takes to get your nursing license so that we can deal with the fact that we are missing a lot of nurses right now, right? We've had a big outflow nationally of people leaving the nursing profession. And so we started providing lunchtime opportunities to have concerts in this beautiful courtyard and just to bring the students to a place where it's okay to work, it's okay to talk and eat lunch, but also you have this common ground with the faculty and the staff and to build community. So yeah, so my job really is to run around everywhere and say, how can I help you? And think about that. And as I've been meeting people over the years, the research projects are kind of coming up organically. The cancer researcher said to me, I hear you're interested in starting research, but what would you do with cancer? And I had in my back pocket this study using drum circles that one of the Eastman alumni has done down in North Carolina. So it's a little bit of that being ready when the conversation arises. But I've thoroughly enjoyed getting to meet these brilliant people I work with all over, Rochester. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Okay. So are you ready to tell me about that drum circle? You said you have to have it in your back pocket, but now I'm
I'm
completely
totally ready to tell you about drum circles.
Please
Yes,
tell me
I am.
about this drum circle in Cancer. This sounds so amazing.
So, I mean, I think we've all seen drum circles like at the beach or in,
Yeah.
Washington Park in New York City. And the idea that John Beck is the name of the man who came up with this intervention. The idea is simply that when we're sitting together and making music together, and especially because we're actually making the music, we're not just singing, we're like using our bodies to do that. There's something that's happening. My guess is it's a distraction from the pain, but it's also being in community and supporting each other and sitting in a circle and seeing each other. So he did this study in a hospital that was one-on-one. He would go in, stem cell patient would be in the room. He'd bring them a small drum and they would do some back and forth. They would accompany songs together and they might make up lyrics as well and drum this out. But when he told me about that, I thought, well, that's really interesting. What if it was a whole group of people who were on their survivor journey? So we've been talking about it here, and we even did it's not really a simulation. We actually did the entire protocol with the staff of the cancer center. And man, you can feel the energy in the room. In the first 5 minutes, there's something about having fun, making music. There's no wrong notes. There's no wrong thing you can do. And it was great. They still talk about it. So I'm looking forward to finishing up the protocol and getting through those stages. And then we'll be testing that with our focus will be, does it help chemo brain? And I feel like the upside is if it doesn't, there won't be a problem. You still will have had a really good time. But I'm really hopeful that just that kind of oxygenation that happens when you're thinking about and making music, that may have some impact on chemo brain.
Wow.
Maybe.
Maybe. But like you said, it doesn't hurt anything if it doesn't. They've had a fun time doing it.
Exactly.
Wow. So when does all of this happen? When is this study being done?
When will the study begin? Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
Still TBA, because we're still working through that thorny process of, they look at your protocol and say, but what about this? And what about that? So I think it'll just be another month or two. We have a whole bunch of drums down in the storage area of the cancer building, and I've got the person to lead it. I think we're very close, but I'm hesitant to say it will be this month. Let's see when we get there.
Well, I hope that you'll keep me posted with what the results are of the study.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you said there were a couple. Is there another study that you're working on?
Yeah. Right now, there's a study also at the same cancer center working on music therapy. I believe we said it was only going to be women just to limit the population. So we're working with women with breast cancer who receive radiation. And the problem we're looking at is that it's very painful, which I'm grateful I don't know that, but I have heard that from people who have been patients. And that if you move around at all while you're in there, they have to recalibrate the machine, which just takes longer and it's more uncomfortable. And so we wondered if there was a way to provide music therapy support. So you make a playlist together. You prepare for this before you ever start your radiation treatments. There's a dry run period where they make sure they fit you to the thing that holds you in place, the cage. I don't know what to call that. And the list is created together to support their journey. And we're looking to see, does that help with anxiety? Because you know how long it's going to last. You know these are musics that you like. And so we just got that off the ground. Finally, we pitched it pre-COVID. It was accepted, and then there's no way. We're just getting started collecting data on that, and I'm very hopeful that it will show that it's a really good support for people receiving radiation.
Yes. So they make this playlist. Does the playlist last the exact same amount of time as the treatment?
I believe that's correct. I believe that they create a list that's at least long enough to go the full length of the treatment.
Oh, so that could help somebody as they're laying there. If something hurts, they'll be like, okay, I know I'm on this song, which means I only have 15 minutes left.
I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe that's part of it. And the other part of it is that in the days between your dry run and when you actually start, you listen to that playlist kind of as a way of psyching up for I can do this, I can get through this, I've got this support. So we'll see, but I'm very hopeful. There was a lot of good research that it went into developing that protocol.
Oh, that's exciting. Because you think about, I just think about other endurance things like training for a marathon. People will often have playlists to help them through, that really hard 17 through 23 mile area. And so I could see that there really is, I think that'll be great. I hope that works out.
I hope it does too. And I suspect, sort of like drum circles, that there isn't a downside to it. So if we don't find out what we thought we did, maybe we will find out something else. Can I tell you something funny? As we were trying to figure out how we'll play the playlist for people, like they can't have headphones or anything, but the machines actually have a built-in audio system. We discovered that they had Spotify for the patients, but it wasn't a paid account. So you'd be listening to this great music, and you'd get blasted with an ad. And I thought, oh, friends, no. Like, please think about what's going on here.
Let's just pay the.
But this is one of those times where all you have to do is ask the nurses, like, what's something that you wish was different? Just like, if everything is possible, what could I do to help you? And when you hear that, it's like, okay, we can pay for a premium account. But,
It's not that big of an investment. That's great. I'm glad that they were honest and you asked them so you could do that little thing to help people, because those ads are annoying.
Oh,
so yeah. Now, switching gears a little bit, you have a very personal story when it comes to health and to music. Would you mind sharing what it was that made you shift into this administration position?
Yeah, I'm always happy to. I actually had normal hearing growing up, and I knew I wanted to be a classical musician, and double bass is where I found myself, oddly, when I was a teenager. So it's hard work. It's a lot of hard work, but it was really something I enjoyed very much. And, I pretty quickly won a job here with the Rochester Philharmonic when I was 25. And that was just great. It was really great playing these concerts. And I was in my early mid-30s when I started to have Ménière's disease symptoms show up. I was getting really dizzy. My hearing was fluctuating up and down, but it would always come back. And we thought Ménière's often does not result in deafness. It often just does this for a while. You yo-yo back and forth with your balance and your hearing, and then it stabilizes. But I'm an outlier. And so 10 years it took of this kind of yo-yoing, and the hearing would never come back as much. And to be honest, it was kind of a relief when this ear went deaf, because I didn't have these conflicting sounds coming in, that sometimes this would be kind of watery or it would be the wrong pitch, and I'd have to put in a earplug. So I actually moved from a part-time position to winning a national audition with the Philharmonic with single-sided deafness. And I didn't tell anybody because I kind of felt like it's none of their business.
Yeah, I can understand that.
But the truth is, in the performing arts, and especially in music, having any kind of hearing loss is really perceived as a huge ding against you. That whether it's you've done something wrong to acquire that hearing loss, or you can't be trusted with pitch, or whatever it is, I knew it was going to be problematic. So I just didn't talk about it, kind of bluffed a lot. And I think people who are losing their hearing know what I'm talking about, that you just kind of smile and nod at times and hope that you didn't just agree to pay someone a lot of money. And so, that went along okay for a few years. And then very suddenly my right ear also presented with Ménière's disease. And again, that's an outlier thing. You don't always get it in both ears. So that created some more problems with just balance, but also pitch. I have wild pitch distortion in this ear that has remained. So by very, very late 2016, it was Christmas Day, I woke up completely deaf. And sometimes that happens, which I'm actually used to, which is weird to say. But this lasted and lasted. And we were on vacation from the orchestra, and it was time to go back to work. And I'm like, I'm still completely deaf. And I don't want to tell them that's why.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm feeling like, what am I supposed to do now? I had to ask my husband to call the personnel manager and say, she's too sick to come in. And this went on for weeks and then months and nearly a year, with us using voice to text. We started learning sign language. I was like, I don't know what's happening. My doctor doesn't know what's happening. Will it end or won't it? And then all of a sudden one day it just all came back. And
Really?
a week later it went away again. I was like,
Oh
okay,
my
this
goodness.
is what am I supposed to do with this now if this is going to be this inconsistent? So I appealed to my ENT and said I'd really like to be implanted with a cochlear implant, because at least on my deaf side, I would have a steady source of sound. And I know that it's not going to sound good. I've done all this research. And so I qualified for that. And in 2018, I was implanted with an advanced bionics cochlear implant. And it's great. It's great. And yeah, music is terrible, but it's really great. But it's at that point that I thought, okay, I have enough stability now with my hearing that I can make this shift. So what do I want to do? And during that time leading up to like, am I getting my hearing back or not? A friend of mine said, I think you should go play in the hospital, because I was really missing playing and I play fine, but I just can't hear it, right? Well, I don't know. Why not? Like, why not go try this? And so I made arrangements with the cancer center and I went every week. And it was terrifying at first because I can't hear myself very well. And I don't know how loud I am. And I don't know if people like what I'm playing. But when you said, you've played in the lobby and you see that shift, once I started to see that, I would see people really focus and like their shoulders will come down and they might start to fall off to sleep, which, if I was on stage, I'd feel like, hey, I'm playing here. But when I saw
Totally
that in the
different.
hospital, oh, my heart, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, this is real service. This is real
Yeah.
service to the community. This is really different from playing on stage. And so suddenly, I think it took about 4 or 5 weeks before I went, this is what music is for me. This is what it is now. It's service to the community. And I just really loved it. I loved meeting all the staff. I loved meeting patients, and family members. And that, I don't know if that trickled up to the dean of the Eastman School or if that was just a coincidence, that was around the time they decided they wanted to launch this program. Knew through the grapevine that I wasn't working and I was looking to come back into the field. And I had some nonprofit management experience. So it was one of those, we have a short-term funding. Would you be willing to try this on for a few months? And I thought, I have absolutely nothing to lose. I don't have to move. I know all these people. I know the school. I'm an alum of the school. I obviously know the hospital now. And, I'm really interested in how we serve the community. And it turned out to be even better than I could have imagined, getting to meet all these people. And sort of on the sly, I get to do hearing advocacy as well, because I constantly have to say, can you put on captions or can you face me when you speak? And just embracing that rather than running away from it when I was a performer, just embracing like, this is just who I am. There's nothing wrong with me, having to say that I have this disability. But that was a pretty uphill battle to get to that point.
So it is not common then for people to lose their hearing completely.
That's what I understand, that is not common.
Have you run into anybody else who's had an experience like yours?
I have. Yeah, just 1 or 2 people though.
Yeah. So it was a year that you were kind of hiding this. That must have been difficult or, just kind of unsettling. How did you deal with it during that year that you were trying to still live that one life where your body was saying, no, we need to shift to this life now?
Some of it was a kind of slow transition. So I also teach my instrument mostly to kids 18 and under. And I found when I was thinking about, I can't go play on stage right now. And I said to myself, you should just give up your teaching post until this settles out. And my whole body went, oh, like as if someone sat on me. It was so strange. And then I was like, okay, how about I keep teaching as a deaf person? And my whole body went, oh, I'm like, oh, okay, that's weird. So I reached out to a few students and I'd had most of them for 3, 4, 5 years. So they've known me for a long time. And I said, have a weird proposal for you. What would you think about working together? You can quit at any time and go to another teacher. If we feel like it's not working out, I will absolutely stop teaching. And to my complete surprise, all of my students said, yeah, sure, let's try it. And we did the phone voice to text if I couldn't understand what they were saying. And I wasn't hearing them, but I was seeing them. So it gave me this transition period where I didn't have to give up everything with music. And it just kind of allowed me to test the water of like, well, if I wind up fully deaf, there's ways, right? I might not stay as a music teacher, but there's ways to communicate. There's ways to be helpful. And then I kind of did the same thing with the Philharmonic. That's sort of like physical body testing. I don't know, one day I was thinking about it and I thought, what if my hearing came back tomorrow and I never went back to the Philharmonic and I just felt like released and free? Oh, that's interesting. And then so same question. Okay, so what if my hearing came back tomorrow? I'd go right back to the orchestra. It's like, okay, buddy, I'm going to listen to you. I got to play for over 20 years in the orchestra, and that is a full career in many ways. I've done a lot of tours. I've done a lot of recordings. Like, I know what that is. I can share that with people, and I'm still young enough to do something else. But it was a really interesting moment, and I shared that with my husband that night when he came home. I said, how would you feel? My hearing came back, and I never went back to the orchestra. He said, absolutely fine. Great. It was good to have that kind of like, that confidence that we're not shooting at this because... I mean, it looks glamorous, right? Life on stage looks glamorous. It's not, but it looks it. And it's nice to be able to say, I was the only woman in the bass section the whole time I was there. It's nice to have that little feather in my cap, and it's okay to let it go too.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love it that you were able to listen to your body and that you weren't so caught up in the romance of being on stage and things. That's so amazing. And then, so when you started performing at the hospital and you get this like light bulb, did your body have these reactions like, oh, this is what I must do now?
It was slower than that. It did take a couple weeks, and it didn't happen at the hospital. I think it happened when I was driving home one day and I was having the usual conversation with myself. You probably like this too, right? When you're driving, you're like,
oh, yes.
Too. The very first day I went into play, and I was more nervous than when I auditioned for the Philharmonic, I kept saying to myself, no one here plays the bass. It's okay. It's going to be fine. Right? Like, you're going to be fine. Like, psyching myself up. I unpack my bass, and this guy comes up to me. He's like 80 years old. He goes, I play the bass too. I'm like, oh, that's nice, man. How long have you played? Wait. He goes, oh, I've played for like 40 years. I'm like, oh my God. Thank you, universe, for giving me that. Like, he's actually going to know if I can play or not.
What are the chances?
Exactly, right? What are the chances? But so that was like driving home, and you're like, see, you shouldn't do this anymore. You should do something else. I'm like, he didn't say I was terrible. And I didn't ask him, I was smart enough to do that.
Right.
But the conversation with myself after a while was, this was also day one. A woman came in on her cell phone and sat like, just right next to me. Maybe she's a foot away because the back of the chair is facing me and I'm playing out here. And she stayed on her cell phone for the entire hour that I played. And I was just like, and so those drive home conversations begin. Wow, your ego is really wrapped up in people liking you. Huh. You know what? I realized a week later, all the seats were empty. She could have sat anywhere.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Like I'm interpreting that as she was enjoying it. And then when I started to see people more often, especially if they happened to come on the day that I was playing, some people would. It was nice to see them every other week just to sort of know they're still making it. And just to see that like, oh, like they recognize me, they're excited to listen for a little bit. But it wasn't my ego anymore about, oh, they're happy to see me. It was more like, oh, I can offer this to John or to Mary. Like I can do something right now, because otherwise I feel really like, what does music do? That's a whole philosophical conversation we can have. But you know what I mean? It was really, I really felt useful after a year of feeling like, where is everything going?
Yeah. That must have been just such a relief.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. I mean, like I couldn't figure out what I was going to do long term. It was volunteer, but it definitely was part of that change of what could music mean in my life, that what could music mean in our culture?
Yeah. And now you are spreading that to your community.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really, it's bittersweet in some ways that we've just completed 4 years, because some of my original musicians are now graduating with doctorates, or they're graduating with their masters and they're leaving. And one of them in particular, we were talking the other day, he's like so flexible. I'll send him into any situation and know that he can handle it, and he can give me feedback on whether that's something that we should continue or not. And he said, preparing for my doctoral recital, I now think of the audience much more personally than I did. They're not just coming to hear me play. They're all having struggles and stress and difficulties I can't know. So what is the arc of my recital? What do I hope to give them? It's like, wow, that's amazing. So I think he sort of capped it all as, I've become a more generous performer. And I was like, that's amazing right there. And I actually would like to work more with the performers who have that kind of brush up against their own ego and their own sense of what the music means to them in the hospital, not to break them down, but just to have them become more aware of like, what's your orientation? Why does this matter in this situation? Just to give them more context. Because right now it's not a lot, right? They come and play, and if it's not working out after a couple of tries, I'm like, let's just pause this for a year and talk about it later. So I'd like to get more connection going on between the healthcare workers and the music students, so we have a different kind of dialogue.
Yeah, I think that will be good, because I think making that connection of what music can do besides, just being a star on stage, when you can make that connection with somebody and a real positive emotional connection with your audience, I think that really creates a better musician. Of course, they're going to be wonderfully technically and musicality and all of that. But when you can make that connection, that's when something really special happens. So I applaud you for putting these students through this, because I think it's so good for them.
Well, thank you. I'm just really grateful that I was given the ability, I was given the platform and kind of given the keys to say, go talk to anybody that you think would be helpful. The leadership team was really, really generous with me in that regard. Just, they're each so busy being the dean of what they do, but to have that trust also meant a lot to me.
Yeah. Well, Gaelen, I am so inspired by your story of how you have shaped your life around music, and when unexpected things happened, you listened to your body and you have just turned everything into this beautiful program that is paying it forward to other people. As we finish up, what advice do you have for musicians that are either wanting to go into arts advocacy like yourself, or maybe just wanting to be a musician in general? What sort of advice would you have for them?
Start with, if you're on that track and you want to be a performing artist, a musician, I think really understanding your why is so important. And I would never diminish someone's why. It could be, I want the stability of playing in an orchestra. Like, I'm not going to say that's good or bad, but really getting clear on what your why is. And shout out to Simon Sinek's book, right, on What's Your Why, I think, or First Ask Why. It's really, really terrific way to help you process through what you want to do. And similarly, when people want to come play in the hospital, I do push back to them a little bit and say, okay, why? What does it mean to you? And do you understand that people might not always like what you're going to play? So it's not the usual situation. But when people do want to come into the hospital, the other thing I often say is just be humble about it. Like, so know your why, and then come in service. And so you might talk to the volunteer coordinator or the patient experience director and say, I want to help, but then listen. Don't come in and say, I want to help and I want to do X, Y, Z. I want to help, have these things. What would be helpful to your environment? And then, just understanding that you could talk about other programs, but I think that all comes down to that humility of, I want to be in service more than I want people to say, wow, it's really awesome that you played at the hospital.
Yeah. I love it. Thank you so much. Yes, let us all find our why in all things of our lives, for sure. So, Gaelen McCormick, thank you so much for being here. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you, and I just appreciate you taking the time to teach us about this today.
Well, Christine, thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor to get to share my story, and I hope it's useful to other people,
I'm sure it will be, so thank you.